You're not the favorite. Deal with it. That line, it wasn't a joke in my house. It was practically my family motto. Hey, YouTube. I've been sitting on this story for a long time. Never thought I'd share it publicly. But after everything that's happened, I need to. Because the truth is, sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most end up being the ones who taught you how to disappear. Let me take you back. I'm Cam, 26 now, but this starts way earlier. Back when I still thought being invisible in your own house was normal. Growing up, I was the backup kid. Not the baby, not the miracle, just the extra. My older sister, Jade, was the golden one. 2 years older, perfect GPA, varsity volleyball, homecoming queen, you name it, she did it. If I so much as looked at her the wrong way, I got grounded. She could wreck my bike, and my parents would apologize to her for getting upset. I once got a C+ in algebra, and my mom cried like someone died. Jade failed biology twice, and they hired a private tutor and told her she was just gifted in different ways. It was a pattern that never stopped. They didn't scream at me. That would have been too obvious. They just minimized me over and over, quietly, strategically, like I was a mistake they were too polite to acknowledge. At 9, I broke my wrist, fell off the monkey bars. Mom picked up my sister from swim team first, made me wait at the ER for nearly 3 hours, alone, with a bag of ice melting in my lap. The nurse kept glancing at the door like, "Where are your parents?" I didn't have an answer. My dad? His affection came in the form of backhanded compliments. If I won an art contest, he'd say, "Well, even a broken clock's right twice a day." When I showed him my photography portfolio in high school, he said, "You're lucky colleges don't care about hobbies." Thanks, Dad. The fridge was always stocked with Jade's favorite drinks. I once wrote Cam's snacks on a grocery list. They laughed. As in, actually laughed. There were no birthday parties for me past age 10. Jade had one every year, themed, catered, and Instagrammed. I learned to stop asking. I stopped expecting. They called me dramatic when I wanted to switch out of wearing Jade's old winter coat 2 sizes too small, the zipper broken. "It's still warm," my mom said. "You're so ungrateful. Ungrateful." That was the word they weaponized against me like a knife wrapped in gift paper. They made me feel like I was being given the world when they offered me leftovers from a life that wasn't mine. Jade knew it too. She was slick with it. Subtle sabotage expert. I once got blamed for a dent in the car. I didn't even have my license yet. Guess who'd borrowed it the night before? She smiled at me over dinner that night like, "Good luck, loser." When I finally did get my license, had to take the test in my best friend's car because my parents didn't trust me with theirs. 2 weeks later, Jade sideswiped a mailbox and they said, "Accidents happen." I started staying late at school. Said it was for clubs. It wasn't. I just didn't want to go home. Picked up a job bagging groceries at 16. Told them it was for experience, but it was really so I could afford my own socks without a guilt trip. And through it all, there was only one person who ever seemed to notice. My grandpa, Ray. Not the huggy type. Not the kind to say I love you or call every week. But he saw me. When I was 13, I tried to fix my busted bike with a spoon and 2 nails. He just showed up one afternoon with a box of real tools. No lecture. Just, "You'll probably get more done with these." When school was taking a trip to DC, and my parents said they couldn't cover it this time after dropping hundreds on Jade's volleyball camp, Grandpa quietly handed me an envelope. Inside, the exact amount. No words, just a nod. He wasn't flashy. He was just there. When no one else was, he showed up when I had strep, and my parents forgot I needed antibiotics. Drove me to the pharmacy himself, picked up soup on the way back, never asked for thanks, never told them, just handled it. And the wild part? He never said a single bad thing about my parents, not once. But every action screamed, "I see you. You matter." When I got into college on a full scholarship I clawed my way to without a shred of help, my parents texted me congrats. That was it. Ray? He drove the U-Haul, hauled my stuff up 4 flights of stairs, slipped me $300 in 20s. For emergencies, he said, then paused and added, "Or pizza. Whatever's more urgent." That moment? I think that was the first time I felt like I actually belonged to someone. College was freedom. I thought maybe distance would change things. Spoiler, it didn't. Text on birthdays. Occasionally a house school, like they were trying to remember if I was still alive. Meanwhile, Grandpa came to visit twice a semester. No fuss. Just to take me to lunch or fix something in my apartment. Always checking the oil in my car. Always asking if I was eating enough. And then he got sick. Didn't tell anyone for a while. That's how he was. When he finally went into hospice, I visited every day. I was there when the nurse held his hand and whispered that it was time. I didn't cry right away, I just held his hand back. Because I didn't know how else to say goodbye. The funeral was quiet. No drama. Jade posted a photo of them together with a caption like, "Love you always, Gramps. Cute." She hadn't visited him in 9 months. I figured that was the end. A sad goodbye. A clean break. But it turns out, Grandpa had one last surprise. A week later, I got a call from his lawyer. Asked me to come in for the reading of the will. I didn't think much of it. Maybe he left me his tools. Or a photo album. I walked in and saw my parents and Jade already there. That should have been my first clue. They looked like they were waiting for a prize. My mom even wore pearls. The lawyer cleared his throat. Read some boring legal stuff. And then, to my grandson Camden Elijah Rhodes, I leave the entirety of my estate, including but not limited to my primary residence, all bank accounts, my vehicle, and personal belongings. Silence. Total, thick, stare into the void silence. I blinked. Jade's mouth dropped open. My dad looked like he'd swallowed a wasp, and then my mom said it. There has to be a mistake. But there wasn't. He'd updated the will 6 months before he passed. Sound of mind, documented, witnessed, on video if needed. Ray left everything to me. Not split, not shared, not negotiated, everything. And just like that, despair became the storm. After that will reading, something shifted in the air like a fault line under our feet, had cracked just enough for everyone to feel the tremble. I walked out of that lawyer's office with a folder full of keys, documents, and the kind of silence that screams louder than any argument. My mom didn't even look at me. My dad tried to play it cool, but I could tell his brain was chewing on something nasty. Jade? She stared like I'd personally stolen the crown off her head. We left separately. I took the long way home, just driving in circles with the windows down, trying to absorb what had just happened. My chest was full of questions I couldn't answer. Why me? Why now? Why all of it? That house? The accounts? The car? None of it felt real. I'd spent my entire life watching them pretend I didn't matter. And now suddenly I was the center of the storm. I pulled up to Grandpa's my house now, I guess, and just sat in the driveway. The porch light had that same flicker he never got around to fixing. The mailbox still leaned a little left. It looked untouched, like he was inside watching the news, probably yelling at the anchor for being wrong about everything. I let myself in. The smell hit me first. That mix of old books, wood polish, and black coffee. I walked through the hallway like I was visiting a memory. Nothing had moved. His slippers were still by the recliner. A crossword puzzle sat unfinished on the kitchen table. Pen cap chewed to pieces. I found myself tracing my fingers across the backs of chairs, the edge of the door frame, the places I had once stood small and unnoticed, except by him. The phone buzzed the next morning like it had a vendetta. First, a text from Mom. "We need to talk, come by today." Then one from Dad, "Call me." Then Jade, "WTF did you do?" I ignored them all. I needed space to think, to figure out what any of this meant. Over the next few days, the messages ramped up. Calls, voicemails, guilt-wrapped questions disguised as concern. "We just want to understand what happened. Your grandfather was under a lot of stress. Maybe he wasn't thinking clearly. This could have been an oversight, Cam. We can fix it as a family." Right. The same family that couldn't name my favorite color but always remembered Jade's Starbucks order. They didn't care that I was grieving. They weren't shocked by the loss. They were stunned by the math. It wasn't about Grandpa's memory. It was about the assets, the property, the control. And they couldn't stand that I now had something they believed should have been theirs by default. My dad eventually showed up uninvited, walked right into the front yard while I was watering the flowers Grandpa had planted years ago. He started light fake smile, polite tone, like he was selling insurance. Said something about how we're all hurting, and this kind of situation can cause misunderstandings. Then, mid-conversation, he dropped the real reason he was there. "Jade's thinking about getting a place of her own," he said, like it was just casual talk. "We were hoping the house could help fund that. I didn't say anything, just stared at him. His eyes did that twitchy thing they always did when he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted. You know, it's the fair thing, he added, like fairness had ever been a word in his vocabulary. I told him I'd think about it, which was a lie. I already knew the answer. I was just buying time. The calls kept coming. When guilt didn't work, they shifted tactics. Now it was anger. Jade texted me, "You seriously think this is what Grandpa wanted? For you to cut us out?" As if I was the one who'd pulled the rug out from under them. Not the man they barely visited. Mom tried crying over the phone, said I was tearing the family apart, claimed they'd always done their best for me, which would have been hilarious if it wasn't so delusional. They were rewriting history like it was a group project, and I'd missed all the meetings. I didn't respond. I just kept living. I cleaned the house room by room, repaired the leaky faucet in the bathroom, fixed the crooked door on the back shed. I sat on the porch with coffee in the mornings the way Grandpa used to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting to be seen. I just was. About a month after the will reading, I got a certified letter, their new strategy, legal threats. They were contesting the will, claiming undue influence. Said I'd manipulated a sick old man into giving me everything. It was laughable, but I still called Janet, Grandpa's lawyer. She told me not to worry. Everything had been done by the book signed, recorded, witnessed. But they can still make it a pain, she said. They can drag it out, make you spend money you shouldn't have to. And that's when it hit me. They didn't expect to win. They just wanted to wear me down, force me to give up something, anything to make them go away. That is how they'd always operated. Silent pressure, guilt, noise. I decided I wasn't playing that game anymore. I started digging. Pulled every old receipt, file, and notebook from Grandpa's cabinets. He kept everything: bank records, tax returns, even scribbled notes on sticky pads. And buried in one of those folders, I found gold. Handwritten notes from Grandpa showing every loan he'd ever made to my parents. Thousands. Over the years, they'd borrowed for house repairs, Jade's car, even a trip to Mexico, and never paid a dime back. Each note had a date, an amount, and his initials. It wasn't emotional, it was just math, but it was proof. I made copies, scanned everything, sent it to Janet, who compiled a neat little packet and fired it off to their lawyer. Their response? A settlement offer. They wanted 60% of the estate, called it compromise. I called it a joke. I rejected it without hesitation. That's when things got ugly. They started reaching out to extended family, telling them I'd gone rogue, that I was unstable, grieving wrong, being manipulated by greed. An aunt called to check on me, said Mom told her I was having a mental health crisis. I laughed. First time they'd cared about my mental health in 20 years. The smear campaign continued. Jade posted photos of her and Grandpa on Instagram with captions like "Miss you every day. Wish you were here." Comments poured in. "He loved you so much. He'd be so proud I didn't respond. Let her have her stage. She always needed one." What they didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that I was sitting on something much bigger, something I hadn't planned on finding. While cleaning out Grandpa's office, I found a locked drawer in his desk. The key was taped underneath. Classic old man move. Inside, a manila envelope with my name on it, no address, just Cam. I opened it and froze. A letter, a DNA test. At first, I thought it was a mistake or some kind of weird prank, but no, the test was real. Lab logo, signatures, everything. A 99.99% paternal match. Not grandfather to grandson, father to son. My heart stopped. I read the letter, then read it again. I couldn't believe it. Ray wasn't just my grandfather. He was my actual dad. For a while, I just sat there staring at the paper like the letters would rearrange themselves into something that made more sense. The DNA results felt like fiction. A 99% match between Ray Rhodes and Camden Elijah Rhodes. Not grandfather. Father. The first read the letter next. It was handwritten in Grandpa's usual blocky print, neat and firm, like every word had been measured twice before written down. He didn't apologize. That wasn't his style. But he explained. Decades ago, he'd had an affair, brief, unplanned, but undeniable. My mother had been young, struggling, and not looking to raise a child alone. He didn't want to create a public scandal or blow up his life at that age, so he did something he thought was a compromise. He approached his son, my so-called dad, and offered a deal. Raise the child as your own. Keep the truth buried, and you'll be compensated. Not just financially, but in business connections, favors, future guarantees. The kind of offer that reeks of desperation and regret, but also responsibility. And they took it. My mother said yes, my father agreed. But they didn't treat me like a son. They treated me like a check that never cashed in full. Ray, my father, though that word still felt foreign, wrote that he thought giving me a stable home, even under false pretenses, would be better than dragging me into court battles or raising me alone in his 60s. But it hadn't worked out the way he'd hoped. My parents, the ones who cashed in on my existence, resented me from the beginning. He said he noticed that it started small missed birthdays, brushed off achievements, but by the time I was in grade school, it was obvious. He kept waiting for things to improve, for them to grow into the role. They never did. And by then, it felt too late to take me back without causing a scandal. So instead, he tried to be there in the only ways he knew how. The camera, the bike tools, the envelope of cash, picking me up when they forgot. He said he knew he wasn't perfect, but he did what he could from the sidelines. And the will? That was his way of doing something big, something clear, something that couldn't be ignored or rewritten. He ended the letter with a single sentence that hit harder than anything else I'd read. I gave everything to the only person who never asked for it and still deserved more than anyone. I folded the letter and sat in silence. Everything I thought I knew about my life had been rewritten in a few pages. My dad wasn't my dad. My mom had hidden the truth from me my entire life. Jade wasn't really my sister. And the one person who had treated me with consistent, quiet kindness turned out to be the only one telling the truth. It made sense now, the strange distance my mom always had with me, the resentment in my father's eyes that never softened, the way Grandpa had shown up in my life over and over, never asking, just giving. I thought he was trying to be a good grandfather. He was trying to be the only father I had. I didn't tell anyone right away. Not Janet, not my friends, no one. I needed time to process, to get used to the idea that my entire identity had been bent around a lie. But it changed something in me. I wasn't just fighting for what I'd been given in the will. I was defending what I had always unknowingly earned. They didn't just want to take the house or the money. They wanted to erase the one man who had tried to make things right. The court hearing landed about 2 weeks later. The day before, I sat with Janet and finally told her everything about the letter, the test, the truth. She didn't blink, just adjusted her glasses and said, "We'll use it, but we'll do it right." When I walked into the courtroom the next morning, the tension was thick enough to taste. My parents sat stiff in their suits. Jade scrolled her phone like she was already bored of being there. Their lawyer looked confident until Janet stood up. She didn't waste time. Presented the certified will, the video of the signing, the witness testimonies confirming Ray was of sound mind, organized and specific about his intentions. She outlined the unpaid debts, the financial dependence of my parents, the years of borrowing they'd written off as gifts. Then, calmly, she opened a folder and presented the DNA test. It landed like a bomb. She explained that the estate hadn't gone to a distant grandson out of favoritism. It had gone to a son, a biological son. Their lawyer scrambled to object, said the paternity wasn't relevant to the case, but the judge shut it down. He turned directly to my parents and asked if they were aware of this information. My mother's face cracked. My father didn't speak. He didn't need to. The guilt in his silence was louder than any confession. Jade sat frozen, like she'd just watched her whole kingdom collapse. The judge ruled quickly. The will was valid, the challenges were denied, and all claims were closed. Legally, finally, it was over. I walked out of that courtroom alone, but for the first time, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like freedom. No more pretending. No more waiting for someone to treat me like I mattered. They had picked their favorite, built their lives around her, and now they could live with the result. I spent the next few months fixing up the house, staying quiet, ignoring the chaos they were surely spinning up in group chats and whispered phone calls. They had no legal path forward anymore. I'd blocked their numbers, locked down everything, and moved on. It was peaceful, in the way silence after a storm is peaceful. Then, one morning, they came back. I was working on the side fence, headphones in, sun barely up, when I noticed their car in the driveway. Both of them. No warning, no call, just standing there like they still owned something here. My mom was holding a manila folder. My dad looked smaller than I remembered, like whatever was keeping him upright all these years had finally snapped. I took out my headphones and waited. She started with the usual script. Cam, we're not here to fight. We just need to talk. But her eyes were already glistening, and her tone was the same one she used to use right before grounding me for something Jade did. I didn't speak, just stared. She glanced at my dad, who nodded at her like they were running a play from memory. Things have been difficult, she said. We didn't know Jade was going to leave like that. My stomach turned. Of course she left. They must have leaned on her the way they always did. And when she realized the money wasn't coming, she vanished. Probably blocked them, took what she could, and disappeared. I almost laughed. My mom kept talking. We're struggling, Cam. We lost a lot. Your father's business hasn't bounced back. We've had to downsize. We're on the edge. And still, not a single apology. Not one moment of real accountability. Just more reminders that their lives were falling apart and I was somehow expected to be the glue. I let her finish. Let the silence breathe for a moment before I finally spoke. So now I'm not the afterthought. I'm the rescue plan? Her mouth opened, then shut. She looked like she'd rehearsed 100 different outcomes to this moment but forgot to prep for Ano. My dad stepped forward. We're still your parents, Cam. We raised you. I looked him in the eye, steady. No, you housed me. Ray raised me. The only real father I ever had. That was the moment it clicked. I saw it hit them. Saw the years they thought they'd buried ketchup in a second. My mom's eyes dropped. My dad didn't move. They weren't here to fix things. They were here because their safety net had snapped and I was the only rope left in reach. I told them no. Told them I hoped they figured it out. Told them they had picked Jade and burned every bridge behind them. They stood in the driveway for a while after I went back to the fence. I didn't offer them water, didn't invite them in. They eventually left without a word. Haven't heard from them since. After they drove away that day, I stood in the backyard a little longer than I needed to. The sun was hitting just right, warm but not too much, and the breeze carried that dry leaf smell that always reminded me of fall cleanup days with Ray. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not in the house, not in me, but in the air around us. Like something old had finally broken loose, and now it was just floating, no anchor. The silence after their visit wasn't quiet. It was heavy, like walking into a room where a fight just happened, and no one bothered to clean up. I went inside, sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, and replayed every word they'd said, every angle they tried. But all I could hear was the way they never actually said sorry. Not once. No remorse. Just desperation dressed up as family concern. They hadn't come to apologize. They came to cash in. I knew better now. Knew that love doesn't come with strings attached or ledgers. And it definitely doesn't show up at your door only when it's bankrupt. I didn't tell anyone about the visit. Not Janet, not the few friends who knew what I was dealing with. I just let the silence settle again, and this time, I let it stay. It felt like armor. A few weeks later, I got a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years. My cousin Evan, from my dad's side, technically not my cousin at all anymore, I guess. We were close as kids, but our parents didn't get along much, so visits got rare fast. He messaged me out of the blue, said he'd heard stuff went down and wanted to talk. I was cautious but curious. We met for coffee. Evan looked different, older, quieter, like life had slapped him a few times, and he finally started listening. We talked small at first, weather, work, how weird it felt to be adults now. Then he leaned in and said, Cam, your mom's been telling people you manipulated your grandfather's will, that you took advantage of a dying man, said you faked some legal stuff to kick him out of the estate. I didn't flinch. I'd expected it, honestly. That was their go-to move. If they couldn't win with guilt or force, they'd win with pity. I asked him why he was telling me. He said, because I believed them. For a while, until I started thinking about how they treated you at every holiday. How they used to talk about you when you weren't around. I never said anything. I guess I should have. He paused for a long time, looked down at his coffee, then added, you didn't deserve that. None of it. I didn't say much. Just nodded. I didn't need apologies, I just needed truth. On the way home, I thought about how many people probably heard those same lies. How many believe them without question? And how few ever ask me what really happened? It's funny how when you're quiet your whole life, people assume your silence means guilt, that you're hiding something when really you're just surviving. A few days later, another surprise, this one from Jade, a single text. No emojis, no punctuation, just, "Are you happy now?" I stared at it for a full minute before closing the app. Didn't respond. I didn't need to. That question wasn't for me. It was a mirror she hadn't figured out how to look into yet. Because her life, the one built on being the center, the star, the untouchable one, was crumbling, and she didn't know how to live without the audience. Through some mutual contacts I never asked for, I found out she'd moved to a different city a few months back. Tried getting a job with one of Ray's old business partners, someone who knew the whole story. Apparently, it didn't go well. Turned out, reputation followed you faster than you could run. The mask she wore so well at home didn't hold up when she had to stand on her own. It's strange when people who had all the advantages, all the support, all the love, finally find themselves in free fall. They think gravity's broken. But really, they just never noticed it before because someone else was carrying their weight. Around this time, I started going through the last of Ray's office boxes. I had avoided them for months, mostly out of emotional self-preservation, but something in me felt ready now. Inside one of the deeper drawers, I found an old flip phone, dead battery. I charged it, half expecting it to be empty, but it wasn't. It had texts, notes, even voice memos. The most recent entry was a memo dated 2 weeks before he passed. I hit play. His voice came through soft, a little slower than I remembered, but still him. He said, "If you're hearing this, I guess I didn't get to say everything I wanted. I hope by now you found the truth. I hope you know it wasn't your fault. None of it. I should have stepped in sooner. I wanted to. I just didn't know how without blowing everything up. But I see you now, Cam. I've always seen you. I love you. And I'm proud." I didn't cry. Not right away. I just sat there holding the phone, his voice still echoing in my chest like it was stitched into my ribs. Eventually, I copied everything onto a hard drive, saved it, backed it up 3 times. His words weren't just closure. They were confirmation. Proof that I wasn't crazy. That the things I remembered, the way I felt, the weight I carried it, was all real. One afternoon not long after, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded sheet of lined paper, handwritten. The penmanship was shaky. It was from my mother. She wrote that things had gotten worse, that the house had been foreclosed, that my dad was dealing with health issues, that Jade hadn't returned any of their calls in months, and then she wrote something I'd never seen from her before. I think we made a mistake. That was it. No apology, no details, just that sentence. I sat with it for a while, tried to figure out if it moved something in me. It didn't. I wasn't angry. I wasn't satisfied either. I was just done. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where the court documents were. Just another artifact of a story that no longer needed a sequel. Life moved on. Slowly, but steadily. I fixed the roof. Repainted the back porch. Started using the old camera Ray gave me again. Took photos of birds in the backyard. Found myself smiling without thinking about it. Sometimes grief doesn't hit like a tidal wave. Sometimes it's a quiet tide, washing away the things you thought were permanent until one day you realize the sand under your feet is finally still. I wasn't rich, I wasn't famous, but I was finally whole. And that, for me, was everything. The days that followed felt quieter, not just outside but inside my head. I wasn't waiting anymore for explanations, for apologies, for that invisible moment when someone might finally say I mattered. That ache I'd carried for most of my life had settled into something different. Not happiness exactly, but stillness. I kept living. Work became easier now that I wasn't carrying the emotional weight of pretending. I got promoted a few months after the court hearing, something small but steady, and for the first time it actually felt earned. Not something I clawed at just to prove I had value, but something I stepped into because I knew I did. I stopped bracing every time my phone buzzed. I stopped checking the mailbox with that weird, nervous tightness in my chest. And slowly, I started to take the house and make it mine. Not just the way you clean or update or rearrange, but the way you let a place fill up with your life. I painted the spare bedroom and turned it into a reading room. I replaced the old curtains in the living room with ones I picked out just because they felt warm. I started keeping fresh fruit on the table the way Ray used to, even though I barely remembered to eat it most days. I found myself talking out loud sometimes, narrating my thoughts like he might still be listening. One morning, while fixing a loose hinge on the backyard gate, I caught myself saying, "You'd have told me to use the shorter screws first, huh?" And I smiled, because yeah, he would have. There was a kind of comfort in that, knowing that some people don't just disappear when they die. Some people stay stitched into the habits you pick up without realizing. I hadn't planned to revisit the letter from my mom. It sat in that drawer untouched for months. But one rainy Saturday, I opened it again, not because I was looking for meaning, but because I was finally strong enough to read it without falling into old patterns. I still didn't feel sorry for them, but I didn't feel rage anymore either. Just distance, like reading the journal of someone I once knew but no longer understood. I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say, and then life did what life always does. It kept moving. My circle stayed small. A couple of old college friends, some new ones from work, a neighbor down the street who'd started leaving baked goods at my door after she saw me fixing the front gutter in the rain. No one asked too many questions. No one needed me to explain the long, complicated history behind the quiet I carried. They just accepted it, and that was enough. One day, a couple I barely knew from the neighborhood invited me to a small get-together. Nothing fancy, just grilled food and folding chairs and music that drifted low through the backyard. I almost didn't go. Part of me still flinched at invitations, expecting them to be laced with obligation or comparison or performance. But I went, and something about sitting there with strangers who didn't know my story and didn't need to just laughing over burnt burgers and bug spray and someone's badly behaved dog felt like a kind of healing I didn't expect. Not loud or dramatic, just simple, steady, human. Later that night when I came home, I sat on the porch with a blanket and a beer and looked out over the yard. The stars weren't especially bright. The air wasn't especially warm, but everything felt right. Not perfect, just real. The next morning, I opened one of the last boxes from Ray's garage, a battered container labeled "Misk Old Tools." Inside, beneath layers of worn cloth, I found a small wooden box. Inside that, a folded note with my name and a pocket watch I'd never seen before. The note was short. "This belonged to my father. I don't know if it works anymore, but you do." I held it for a long time. It didn't tick. The hands were stuck at 3:47, but I didn't care. It wasn't about timekeeping. It was about memory, legacy, something passed down not through blood or tradition or obligation, but through choice, through intention, through quiet, constant care. I placed it on the shelf above the reading chair, next to a photo of us on my high school graduation day. I remembered that moment. Everyone else had rushed to get photos with Jade, who had just finished some volleyball tournament. Ray had waited patiently by the side, holding a gift bag with a card that said, "No one earns the future like you do." I didn't even open it until hours later. Inside was a journal, blank pages, the kind that invites stories, not just record them. I never wrote in it. I hadn't felt like I had a story worth telling. But now I wasn't so sure. A few weeks later, I got an email from Janet, subject line, "Follow-up, no action needed." She'd received a message from my parents' former lawyer, apparently no longer representing them. The firm had closed out their case. Nothing more to pursue, just paperwork. But at the bottom of the message, Janet included a single sentence. "I hope this brings you a small piece of peace." It did. Not because it was over legally, it had been for a while, but because it felt like the last echo of their reach had finally faded. I didn't expect a grand closure moment. Life doesn't really work that way. It wasn't like the credits rolled and music swelled. It was more like walking into a room that used to be full of noise and realizing it's finally still. And in that stillness, I found space to imagine more. Not revenge, not payback, just a future that didn't orbit around them anymore. A life where I could be whole, without needing them to fill in the cracks. Every now and then, I'd hear from someone who knew someone, stories trickling in about how my mom had taken a part-time job, how my dad had sold one of their cars, how Jade had moved again. I didn't chase the updates. I didn't block them either. I just let them exist, like static in the background, meaningless noise from a channel I didn't listen to anymore. The story they told themselves about me was still out there, I was sure. that I was ungrateful, that I turned on them, that I twisted Grandpa's last wishes, but I didn't need to correct them. Truth doesn't beg for permission to be believed. It just waits quietly, and sooner or later it stands tall enough to be seen without a spotlight. I used to think closure would come with a dramatic scene, raised voices, final words, maybe even tears. But now I know better. Sometimes closure is just the absence of need, not needing their approval, their explanations, their presence, just waking up in a house that's mine, sipping coffee on a porch I fixed myself, and not thinking about them at all. That's closure. That's peace. Story 2. Allow him to heal himself. He chose to tumble from a pole, but we're not going to waste the journey. My mother chuckled. I said, thanks for the clarity. After that, I barred everyone, depleted the shared account, and watched them go crazy. They are now pleading for assistance. Hello, everyone. Prior to starting today's video, I need your assistance. We've noticed the channel is losing some traffic, and subscribing is one of the finest ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your assistance is much appreciated. Together, let's continue to build this channel. Many thanks. Let's begin the video now. Hey, there is a very problematic family scenario on Reddit. After I fractured my back, underwent surgery, then fell from a pole at work, my family decided to go fishing instead of helping me. While I lay in a hospital bed, they went out using my money to book chalets. Yes, it is that awful. So fasten your seatbelt. Thus, since I was 22, I, a 34-year-old guy, have been employed by the electricity company as a lineman, good salary and good benefits. However, the work is extremely risky. Not like those comfortable office occupations where a carpal tunnel or paper cut is the major hazard. I'm talking ATIF climbs up poles that shake in the wind, handling cables holding enough electricity to fry you from the inside out, all while dealing with whatever Mother Nature decides to throw at you that day. Last winter, I worked 16 hours straight restoring electricity amid an ice storm. I could hardly feel the instruments since my fingers were so numb. When a line suddenly became hot, I had a friend lose 3 fingers. Another man broke his pelvis after falling, but whatever, it paid the bills. It seems to be everyone's, not just mine. I was always the other son in our home as a child. The golden child who could do no wrong was my 31-year-old younger brother, Jared. The guy had a natural charisma that made my parents almost adore the ground he walked on, played football in high school, and received good grades. He wasn't even a very good football player. My parents pretended to be raising the next Tom Brady, but I was a second-string quarterback who primarily warmed the bench. I, on the other hand, was the quiet, diligent child who never quite fit in. In actuality, Jared's grades were lower than mine. Throughout high school, I worked part-time at a hardware shop and even took first place in a state sketching competition. However, for some reason, my parents were unaware of that. Jared's practice was the topic of every conversation during supper. Jared's games, Jared's college possibilities. I would carefully chew my food while I sat there, practically undetectable. My father, a former factory boss, used to spend most of my early years criticizing me for not working hard enough. I put in a lot of work, but not on things he thought were essential, therefore it doesn't matter. Mom works as an elementary school secretary and nevertheless manages to attend all of Jared's games. However, she was too busy to attend my drafting tournament when I had other commitments. When I graduated with honors, she was suffering from a migraine. At work, she had to fill in for someone. They would never confess to favoritism, but after all, deeds speak louder than words. Jared received a partial scholarship to state a few days after graduating high school. After 2 years, Blue gave up partying and left. I immediately enrolled in trade school, earned my certificates, and set to work mending lines and climbing poles. And for some reason, I was still not the family's success story. Dad used to refer to me as Mike and Jared as my son who attended state, as if I were a footnote to the family legacy, an afterthought. Guess who initially began assisting Jared with his rent when he was unable to find a job that matched his ability? Anything that required actual labor or beginning at the bottom? It was intended to be a one-time occurrence. With the same endearing smile that has kept him out of trouble throughout our lives, He answered, "Just until I get on my feet, bro." However, once became into once a month, and eventually it was taken for granted. Additionally, the family's pocketbook was a complete fool when mom and dad's roof began to leak. Their car required a new gearbox. Or, yes, good old trusty Mike. I also opened a joint account for them to access money in case of crises. It began at 11 p.m. when dad called, due to their furnace dying in January on a Sunday. Rather than driving over with cash or letting them wait for me to transfer money, I believed that the joint account would simplify matters, prove to them that I wished to assist. What a farce. I was still just the family punchline, the predictable letdown, not much more. Every family reunion was the same. Mom and dad would nod in agreement as if he were proposing on Shark Tank, and Jared would arrive dressed in new clothing and talk about some business concept that was sure to succeed this time. They would then turn to me and smile condescendingly. "How is work doing for you, Mike? Those poles are still being climbed," as though I were a trained monkey doing a prank. "He's not a skilled tradesman." Keeping the damn electrical grid operational. I heard my mom and my aunt conversing in the kitchen around Thanksgiving last year. The fact that Mike's job pays so well is truly a godsend. Jared needs time to discover his way. I'm not getting any younger, and neither is your brother. Not a single word of gratitude or pride in my assistance. I'm just happy that my income allowed my deadbeat brother to live comfortably into his 30s. I recall thinking as I drove home that evening why I continued to put up with this nonsense. For years, that was the only way. Jared would make a mistake. I would save him. Something was required by parents. I would supply it. They talked about Jared's stress and his search for meaning all the time. I was still living in an apartment that I partially paid for at the age of 31. Nobody ever inquired about the costs of working 70-hour weeks during outage season or scaling power poles and thunderstorms. They never inquired about the time I was hurled 10 feet after being caught in an unexpected electrical arc. I barely made it through my safety harness. The persistent backache from carrying equipment up and down poles every day was never brought up. The worst thing is the scars I have on my hands from years of physical labor. I had persuaded myself that this was typical and that family meant this, taking you for granted while bearing the burden of everyone else. My coworkers would make remarks about how frequently my family phoned to beg for money, but I would simply brush it off. That's the way things are. Like a mantra, I would say. Then, around 2 months ago, I was involved in a major workplace accident. A limb fell free during a windstorm and threw me off balance when I was perched on a pole. My hand, gripping at nothing but air, dropped about 25 feet before my backup safety line grabbed me, and I can still remember the awful sensation of suddenly being weightless. However, the harm had already been done. I injured my right knee, shattered my pelvis, and damaged 2 vertebrae. I recall my coworkers radioing for an ambulance while I lay on the ground, immobile, rain pelting my face. The doctors stated I was fortunate not to be paralyzed, but before I could even consider returning to work, I would require significant back surgery and at least 3 to 4 months of recuperation. It was not sugar-coated by the surgeon, Mr. Matthews. This goes beyond pain treatment. After metal rods are used to brace your spine, you will require intense physical therapy to restore your range of motion. For at least the first month, you won't be able to take good care of yourself. With workers' compensation and my savings. Financially, I would be fine, but I need real assistance while I'm recovering. For at least the first month, the doctors were clear that I would require help getting around with cooking and other necessities, unable to operate a vehicle, unable to bend, unable to lift more than 5 pounds. I was essentially unable to do anything that might strain my just repaired spine. The day following the accident, I contacted my parents from the hospital. When I informed Mom what had happened, she answered on the 4th ring and seemed preoccupied. A pause occurred. "Oh, that's horrible, honey. When we can, we'll try to see how you're doing." When they can, they try. As if it were an errand to visit their seriously injured son, they'd squeeze in between grocery shopping and getting the oil changed. As soon as he got on the phone, Dad asked if I was receiving paid leave from the employer, more focused on my financial situation than my physical well-being. He said that since pole climbing is a sport best left to young men, I should consider desk work. In reality, neither of them volunteered to assist me in my recuperation. Then, in the hopes that my brother would stand up, I contacted Jared. His answer? "Oh my, that's terrible, dude. Hey, honestly, since you're going to be home anyhow, might I stay at your apartment for a couple weeks?" Once more, my landlord is being a jerk when it comes to rent. I simply hung up. Didn't even respond in a way that was dignified. In the meanwhile, I was driven home from the hospital and assisted with getting situated by my friend Derek, who was part of the line crew. Just a coworker who had known me for 6 years, not a blood relative. But in order to prepare my house for recuperation, he took 2 days off from work. To save me from having to deal with the stairs, he even filled my refrigerator and made a temporary bedroom on the first level. He relocated my TV down, set up a little fridge within reach of my bed, even made up this pulley system with rope so I could retrieve anything without bending. In order to keep me from going crazy from boredom, my crew supervisor, Pete, came by a couple times during that first week to see how I was doing, bring food, and simply hang out. "I'll need something to keep me busy," he said, bringing over his PlayStation and setting it up. Pete, a former Marine who hardly ever smiled, wasn't exactly the kind of person who was warm and cuddly. But there he was, teaching me how to arrange the bed exactly right to reduce back pain. He, Travis, my cousin, phoned me 2 days before to my operation. Even though we didn't see each other very often these days, we had always been close as children. He was employed as a project manager for a construction business and resided around an hour away. "Just checking in, dude. Before you have surgery, is there anything you need?" We spent some time discussing the procedure, the recuperation period, and other enjoyable topics. He then revealed on the call that he had spent the previous day at my parents' house assisting them with a backyard project. "Weird thing," he murmured, in an uneasy tone. "In Jared, your parents were organizing a fishing excursion to a Lake Murray cabin rental boat. The works must be costing a few grand at least." My brain was having trouble digesting what I was hearing, so I became silent. When I questioned if Travis's operation was the reason for the delay, your mother simply chuckled and told me to let him heal on his own. Mike's decision to tumble from a pole won't ruin a wonderful trip. After everything, that stuff hit me like a second fall. They wouldn't even be present for my operation, despite everything I had done for them. Additionally, they were funding their small trip fund, which was meant to be used for real emergencies with my money from that same account. I was still chatting to Travis when I looked at the joint account on my phone. It became out that Lake Murray Outfitters was still owed $3,200. Over the previous 3 days, they had also taken out an additional $2,500 in cash. What sort of emergency necessitated cash withdrawals of $1,000? I spent an hour or so staring at the ceiling after we hung up. Finally, something broke inside of me. For all these years, you have been the safety net, the provider, and the dependable one. Furthermore, I wasn't even worth delaying a fishing excursion for. The insight struck me like a punch to the body. I wasn't loved by them. Maybe they never had. To them, I was only a resource, a convenience. I made the decision to stop then. I appreciate Travis being honest with me. I checked my bank account on my phone as soon as we hung up. When you can hardly move, thank God for mobile banking. I took $8,700 out of the joint account and sent every single dollar, leaving not a single penny. Additionally, I canceled the emergency credit card I had given them, which they had already maxed up twice and which I had foolishly paid off. I was prompted by the online system to give a reason for the cancellation. I pushed submit after typing fraud risk. I then gave Derek a call. "Hey guy, I need a massive favor. Would you be able to assist me with setting up some cameras tonight?" He didn't even ask questions since he was a neurotic lineman who had previously had his equipment stolen from a construction site. Arrived with a few wireless security cameras that I could watch from my phone. We put one above the temporary bedroom I was using, one in the living room, and one facing the front entrance. Derek gave me a knowing look and added a chain lock to the front door just in case. He also changed the code on my garage door opener. At corporate picnics, he had met my family. He was aware of the score. The next morning, I underwent a 4-hour operation in which they essentially replaced a portion of my spine with titanium hardware that would trigger metal detectors for the rest of my life. At 5 in the morning, Travis had taken me to the hospital, waited the entire time, and was present in the recovery area when I awoke feeling dazed and disoriented. The morning following my successful operation. Fortunately, though, I was extremely tired and in excruciating pain. About 9 a.m., my phone began to erupt with notifications. The moment they found out the account was empty, apparently. All calls were missed. The messages keep coming in. Get on the phone now, Mom, Michael. What became of the account, Dad? Make a call right now. Mom. Once more? Have you spent all of the emergency money? Jared. What's wrong with you, dude? I needed that money. I just lay on my medical bed, feeling calm and high on painkillers, ignoring everything else. I wasn't rushing to solve their issues for once. Travis helped me get comfortable with my medications and everything else, and he drove me to and from surgery. That morning, I had a checkup from my neighbor Susan, a retired nurse I had occasionally assisted with yard labor. She was this no-nonsense woman in her 60s who'd worked in the ER 40 years. After taking a quick glance at my incision, she declared it to be healing wonderfully and moved my pillows to reduce strain on my lower back right away. The individuals who were genuinely concerned were coming. My mom immediately went into attack mode when I eventually picked up the phone at midday. Come on, Michael James, what did you do? Scott. It's good to hear from you as well, Mother. How is your fishing excursion going? I remarked, voice still raspy from the anesthetic tube. You dare not be clever with me, the account. Where is the money? My incision hurt like hell when I laughed. Oh, that, I shut it down, she said in a high-pitched voice after a moment of stillness. That was not your right. It was emergency money. For urgent situations like your Lake Murray fishing vacation or my back surgery. She sputtered. How did you? That's absolutely different. Jared's predicament has caused a great deal of concern for both your father and myself. We needed this respite. You're right. It's not at all stressful to have a youngster who nearly became disabled. Silly me. It's unfair. She lost her temper. We were planning to see you after our trip. Whoa, how kind. Bring me a cheap keychain from the bait store, perhaps. This was the direction of the conversation until I hung up. Strangely, I felt better than I had in years, even though I needed another round of the painkillers since they were wearing off. I felt as though a huge burden had finally been removed from my back. The surgeons were unable to remove it. An hour or so later, one of the security cameras Derek had installed sent me a notification. I had a visitor at my front door. My dad and Jared were standing there looking angry as I looked at the feed on my phone. I was in bed, lying down. Couldn't even get to the door if I wanted to. However, they were unaware of that. They spent at least 5 minutes hammering on the door, increasing in volume and aggression. Dad's face is becoming more and more red every minute. Jared was pacing like an animal in a cage. After then, I saw my dad take out a key. Just in case, I gave them the emergency key years ago. As they allowed themselves in, my heart began to race. Where the devil are you, Mike? My dad's voice reverberated through the house. As I saw them pass through my living room on the CCTV stream, I said nothing. Jared was already opening drawers and looking through my belongings. Perhaps he has money hidden away. These individuals were completely insane for sneaking into my home, searching through my possessions, and stealing money when I was recuperating from a severe operation. Additionally, they found nothing incorrect with this image. I pressed the app's record button as they approached my temporary bedroom on the first floor. My dad came in, face flushed with fury when he spotted me in bed. I had in a hospital gown with a back brace on. The bedside table has medication bottles and wound care items spread out close to the bed. The picture of someone gravely damaged. Mike, where's the friggin' money? He was almost spitting. While I'm recuperating from serious surgery, you broke into my home. It's your turn. My heart was pounding, but I spoke calmly. Don't bring up another topic. That money is necessary for our journey. Everything has already been reserved. A dot. I chuckled, and the agony shot through my body like lightning. Yes, indeed. The fishing excursion. More significant than the health of your son. Jared took a step forward. Quit being so theatrical. This is only back surgery. You're not really dying. It was almost astonishing how casually he downplayed a treatment that had actually placed titanium rods in my spine. If it wasn't occurring to Jared, it wasn't actually happening in his universe. My father's face became even more flushed. Our emergency fund was that. An odd way to define emergency. Neither of you ever put a cent into it, as far as I can recall. And my father became really agitated. Crinkled fists. This has to be fixed immediately. I gave him the same look. Or what? A man who just underwent spinal surgery will be hit by you. Jared was still excited, but Dot seemed to bring him back to earth a little. Ashel, just send the money back. You don't really need it laid out here. Leave my house. Now both of you. Dad poked me with his finger. It's not over yet. I responded, you're correct, and this is only the beginning, I assure you. When they eventually departed, they slammed the door so forcefully that my windows shook. As soon as they left, Derek immediately came over to change my locks when I contacted him. I also contacted the police to report the break-in, showing them the video footage from the security cams. Watching the video, Officer Daniels, the officer who took the report, shook his head. Let me clarify. Your relatives broke in to demand money after you underwent significant surgery. He was truly perplexed, as though he was unable to comprehend this degree of dysfunctional family relations. Pretty much, I said. And rather than aiding in your recuperation, they were organizing a fishing excursion. He kept looking up at me with this incredulous expression while taking notes. Yes, using my funds as well. He let out a deep sigh. Even after 12 years as a police officer, family conflicts continue to astound me. This report will be filed by me. A restraining order could be something you want to think about. My phone then rang. Unknown figure. It was the county sheriff's office's Officer Martinez. I was truly the target of a theft complaint from my fucking parents. I almost popped my sutures from laughter. She started, Sir, we have a report that you have embezzled money from a family account. I clarified that I was the one who opened the account, provided all of the funding, and terminated it. I added that while I was recuperating from surgery, I had video proof of my brother and father breaking into my house. There was a long delay, you know. While you were under bed rest, they broke in. Indeed, ma'am. I just reported something to the city police. Consult Officer Daniels. The video is right here. She cleared her throat. I understand. Regarding the account problem, there is no case to be made until their contributions are proven. Thank you. Officer, for days the calls and texts continued. They were first just upset and called me a disappointment, selfish, and ungrateful. During a little fishing trip, Jared left me these long-winded voicemails complaining that I was ruining the family. Like some adolescent having a fit, Dad continued phoning and hung up as soon as I answered. I preserved all of the texts and messages. I still couldn't believe that this was my real family. The fact that I could finally see clearly what had been in front of me for decades was another aspect. As their departure date for Lake Murray drew nearer, the messages became more urgent. Apparently, they had already made non-refundable deposits. It's funny that when it was just their money on the line, they suddenly couldn't afford stuff. They changed their strategy after seeing I wasn't caving. Mom began the guilt trips by stating that she had never raised such a callous son, and that she was heartbroken that I had abandoned my family. She easily forgot that they couldn't even postpone a vacation for my big operation, or that they had taken me for granted for decades. Travis phoned to let me know that they were contacting my extended family to inform them that I had stolen their retirement savings and left them when they needed help. The worst thing? This garbage was actually purchased by some relatives. My Aunt Carol even gave me a call to give me a lesson about respecting your parents. I simply hung up. Here's the real kicker, though. Their fishing expedition was still being planned. The police claimed that someone broke into my house after all the drama. Even without the opulent cabin they had intended to rent with my money, they were adamant on taking that trip. Later, I learned that they had opted out of the week-long guided package they had been considering in favor of a budget lodging and a fishing boat rental. I was more satisfied than I'd want to admit when I imagined Jared and my dad living in a musty hotel room rather than a lakeside cabin. Pete and the men from my team alternated checking up on me while I was going through all of this. Tia, Derek's wife, provided home-cooked meals. When I was unable to get in touch with these folks who owed me nothing, Susan from next door assisted me in changing my bandages. More thoughtful than my own blood, Susan was the first to realize that my mail was strange. You mentioned anticipating disability papers, didn't you? One afternoon, she inquired. The mailman has never brought anything like that to me. When I looked online, I discovered that a number of crucial documents had been recorded as delivered but had never reached me. My mail was being intercepted. It was easy to determine who it was. Then, everything went terribly wrong. My credit monitoring service alerted me to unusual activities 3 days following my operation. A local credit union had attempted to create a loan in my name. Then I received a call from the fraud section of my bank. Someone was trying to get into my accounts by pretending to be me, stating that I had a power of attorney and was disabled due to an accident. I immediately knew who it was. I had listed my dad as my emergency contact on some documents years ago. It's likely that they attempted to access my funds by using that information. Being entitled was no longer the only thing involved. This was outright theft of identity. There was real worry in the bank representative's voice. The individual was well versed in your personal information, sir. Social security number, the maiden name of the mother, even your first pet's name. Only after they were unable to respond to inquiries on your most recent transactions did we start to get suspicious. A chill took hold of my gut. Instead of accepting that the gravy train had come to a stop, my own family was prepared to commit criminal fraud. Rather than seek actual employment or live within their means, they would rather run the danger of facing criminal charges. I shut down all of my accounts after contacting the bank's fraud department. I reported everything to the police and the bank. I then put my credit on hold by contacting the credit bureaus. However, I was no longer only playing defense. Mike gave Travis a call. Do you recall that buddy of yours, who is an attorney? The family law specialist? Sarah, a lawyer who specialized in elder abuse issues, but also dealt with situations of financial exploitation between family members. And I met virtually 2 days later. I provided all of the bank data that demonstrated years of one-sided lending. The attempted identity theft was captured on security camera. Everything. She did not respond in astonishment or surprise, just took notes meticulously, occasionally seeking clarity on figures or dates. She responded, "This is really pretty serious." Not to mince words. Committing house invasions when you're recuperating from surgery. Making a fraudulent attempt to access your accounts. These are not only family drama, they are criminal cases. She filed for a temporary restraining order, began constructing a case for financial reparation, and assisted me in writing a formal cease and desist letter. They have exploited you for years, she continued. Some of what you've lost may be recouped by us. I presented my spreadsheet to her. Yes, I did maintain a spreadsheet with all of the loans I had made to them for the previous 10 years. Not including the money they had spent from the joint account, it came to just over $63.00. When she saw the figure, her eyebrows went upward. You have shown a great deal of generosity, she replied cautiously. I have been a total moron. I corrected her. She didn't dispute. The cherry on top. She recommended that we utilize a courier to deliver the legal paperwork to their home. It's time to come. The day before their scheduled departure for their fishing excursion. Rather of assisting you in getting better, they would rather go fishing. She smiled a little as she spoke. While they're lying in bed, let's give them something else to think about. I also called the electricity company a few times. It turned out that a training coordinator position was available. Despite my back problems, I could manage a desk job that paid less than line labor. For years, my boss had encouraged me to apply, stating that I was good at instructing the newcomers. I had a solid chance with his advice. And I was thinking about my life and my future for the first time in a very long time, not taking on the burdens of others. And it was wonderful, despite the discomfort of the surgery. That night, Pete stopped by to assist me in doing some physical therapy exercises. He remarked nonchalantly, I heard you're applying for the training gig. Yes. Decided that a modification was needed. He gave a nod. I've been saying you'd be terrific at it for years. It's time you paid attention. Received a wake-up call. I assume your family. He wasn't one to beat about the bush. Yes. They've been taking advantage of me all along, it turns out. He gave a snort. Not a she. For years, we've all been witnessing it. Just waiting for you to see it, too. That really got to me. Was I truly the last to recognize the dysfunction in my family's dynamics? Has anyone else noticed what I had missed? Why didn't you speak up? I inquired. Pete gave a shrug. Would you have paid attention? There are certain things you have to work out for yourself. He was correct. I doubt I would have paid attention, would have stood up for them, made justifications, kept right on being the family ATM. There are moments when you need to reach rock bottom. My phone exploded with alerts 3 days later while I was sitting in my garden performing the physical therapy exercises I had been prescribed. Mom, what have you done? Dad, you are an unappreciative jerk. Jared, call off your lawyer right away. Man, order of restraint. Are you insane? Hold on. While sipping the protein smoothie Susan had prepared for me, I quietly read through them. Travis had sent a text message. My cousin Amy, who works at the bait shop, just called. When your parents arrived to retrieve their fishing equipment, they were given the papers and completely lost everything. Your dad smashed his phone when he hurled it. Lowell had the option to block them all. But to be honest, I was enjoying their terror for once. After years, it seemed as though a cosmic scale had finally reached equilibrium. They had made me feel anxious and stressed, as if I was never giving enough or doing enough. They were now experiencing what that was like. About an hour later, my doorbell rang. My mother appeared to have been sobbing as she stood there by herself on the surveillance camera. It was real, red-faced sobbing, not the showy, attention-seeking cries she typically used to control me. I was able to speak to folks at the door without standing up thanks to Derek's assistance in setting up a speaker system. You should turn around and go. Through the speaker, I said, the restraining order is pretty explicit. Please, Michael. Her voice broke. We are your parents. How could you harm us like this? The same way you skipped helping your kid after severe surgery to go fishing. The same manner that when I interrupted you, you attempted to take my identity. Your father came up with the notion. He should not save it, I advised him. Mom, everything is described in the papers. Years of mismanagement of finances. The breach in the scam effort. You've been in your 30s before. Because I broke the restraining order, I called the police. She instantly changed her strategy, turning from tears to rage. All right, Jared was correct. You've been self-centered all along. But Michael, you'll regret this. When your back gives out again and you're all alone with nobody to aid you, mid-sentence, I interrupted the speaker. I no longer needed to listen to that nonsense. I was warned by the lawyer that they would attempt to manipulate my emotions. They will claim that you are cruel, ungrateful, and that you will die alone. She had mentioned that these are common strategies employed by abusers. I received a certified letter 2 weeks later. After receiving a breast cancer diagnosis, my mom needed money for therapies that their insurance would not pay for. Medical records and other documentation were attached. Before I found out the documents were fake and phoned the hospital mentioned on the paperwork, I nearly felt awful. She wasn't even a patient there. I spoke with the hospital administrator, who was appalled. I can attest, sir, that your mother is not listed among our patients. Furthermore, this isn't our letterhead. False medical records have been produced. Could you just write that down? My lawyer may require it. As the months went by, the desperation persisted. Dad was laid off. Supposedly, Jared's automobile broke down. There was a leak in the roof. Every crisis is designed to make me reach for my pocketbook and tug at my heart. I moved on with my life after saving all the messages and adding them to the legal file. I was hired by the electricity company as a training coordinator. It was a different job, less physically tough, but more cognitively taxing. While working with Deadly Voltage, I was instructing new recruits on how to survive. It felt nice to be responsible. I felt as though I was at last using my experience to something more significant than simply making it through another day on the poles. My back was recovering nicely, but I would never again climb poles. And to be honest, I didn't mind that. The improvement I made impressed the doctor, said that I recovered earlier than expected. Turns out, when you're not carrying the weight of 3 extra adults, your body can actually focus on repairing itself. The karma struck 6 months after cutting them off. Travis, who was laughing so hard that he could not speak, called me. You won't believe what transpired, bro. Jared and your father were defrauded of $14,000. What? How? I was sitting at my workstation at the training facility reading safety guidelines for the next day's session. They were duped by one of those Bitcoin frauds. Someone said that if they invested in a specific mining operation, they would get their money back thrice in a month. To achieve that, They took out a friggin' loan. Our dot. My coffee almost suffocated me. $14,000. You're kidding me. They had $14,000 to give to a random con artist, but they couldn't spare a day to assist me following surgery. The best part isn't even that, Travis continued. Can you guess who it is? The bank is the target of their lawsuit. They're alleging the bank should have stopped them from making such a blatantly fraudulent transaction. The irony was too perfect. They believed they were too intelligent to fall for a scam, so they voluntarily gave a small fortune to a total stranger after attempting to raid my accounts when I cut them off. And, as usual, they were acting like victims now, attempting to assign responsibility for their own foolishness to someone else. That evening, I was going through my inbox when I came across a message from Jared with the subject, "Please, man, we're desperate." I am. The email was expected. Their debt was overwhelming them. Unable to pay back the debt. It damaged Dad's credit. Mom was experiencing health problems connected to stress. All of this was somehow presented as my problem to resolve. The kicker was the final line. For a period. Despite our disagreements, we are still family. In difficult times, family supports family. To get out of this hole, we need $20,000. I promise we can repay you $500 a month. I typed 4 words and clicked reply. Karma's a bitch, buddy. Then banned his email. Maria, my physical therapist, had informed me that it would take a year or so for my new normal to become ingrained. It wasn't simply my back that she was correct about. After the accident, my life took a radical turn a year later. By moving to a 1-story home near the training facility, I was able to cut down on my commute and ease the strain of everyday living. I had resumed my dating life. It was nice to have that aspect of my life returned, but nothing major yet. And I had a barbecue at my house the next weekend. Tia and Derek were there with their children. Susan from next door, Travis's new girlfriend, arrived with her renowned potato salad. Even Pete, my boss, came in with a 6-pack of soda. Observing these individuals, none of whom were biological relatives of mine, but who all shown up when it counted, I understood that by severing my ties to my brother and parents, I had not lost family. I've just discovered my true love. I was struck by how different this seemed from family get-togethers when I was growing up as we sat around the table. Good people enjoying one another's company was the only thing there. There was no tension or ongoing sense that I was falling short. Susan put an envelope on the counter, which I discovered later that evening when I was tidying up after everyone had gone home. A card with the simple message, "Family is who shows up," was inside. I'm glad you figured it out. It struck me squarely in the chest. I occasionally ponder whether Jared and my parents ever reflect about what they lost. It's me, not the money. Ever feel bad about the way they handled the one person who was always there for them? Most likely not. Seldom do those who take advantage of others possess that level of self-awareness. I don't regret cutting them off myself. I only wish I had done it sooner. I didn't build a backbone until I had a broken one. However, it's better late than never.